What is up? Welcome back to the channel. So as you can see behind me here, we got a new Gladiator in the shop today. This actually belongs to Josh, which you've seen him before if you watch my videos of us up in Colorado. He was my passenger princess that last trip, and decided he didn't want to do that this year, that he wanted his own ride. So this is what he got. It's a 2024 Gladiator Rubicon. This thing is awesome. Unfortunately, right now it is completely stock. So we're gonna change that up a little bit today. So let's go check out what we got. All right, so the first thing that we're gonna do to Josh's Gladiator is we're gonna get that thing up in the air. We're gonna get it looking like I think Jeep should have done it from the factory. You know, the Gladiators, whenever they're stock, they look a little bit silly. The wheels and tires are too small. They're not riding high enough. So that's what we're gonna fix today. We went to JKS and we went with their J-Kontrol lift kit. Now, I haven't seen any good videos kind of describing the differences here. So this is the J-Kontrol kit. It's essentially the exact same kit as the J-Venture, except for it comes with the drop brackets for the front control arms. So this is gonna help maintain that factory geometry up front so that we get a good ride on the highway. Also gives you a little more travel, I think. And it's just gonna kind of keep everything in spec as far as the geometries of that front suspension. So like I said, the rest of the kit is essentially the same as a J-Venture kit. We've obviously got front and rear coils. Now, they advertise this lift as a 3-inch lift. However, kind of doing a little bit more research on the kit, the rears are 1.5 inches of lift only, and then the front is the 3 inches. So that's kind of going to take some of that rake out of the Jeep. It's going to lift the front up a little bit more than the back, but just so you know, you're not getting 3 inches front and rear. It's going to be 1.5 and then the 3 inches up front. Now, whenever you look at the instructions here, it does say that it's 3 to 3.5 on the front and 2 to 2.5 on the rear. So kind of some discrepancies there. What we'll do today is, before we get started, I'll take some stock measurements. And then after we get this kit on, then I'll take some final measurements and we'll kind of see what we actually got out of the kit. So the other stuff that comes with this kit, one thing I really like is this adjustable front track bar. That's super nice, again, to help keep your geometries in spec. And this thing is beefy and solid. I like it, it's nice. Other than that, we've obviously got our extended bump stops for the front and the rear, our extended sway bar links for the rear. And then in the front, now we did order this kit for a Rubicon. So we have the factory sway bar disconnect. However, JKS still sent their quick disconnect front sway bar links. So everything's, you know, kind of all the hardware's in this bag here, but we do have quick disconnects in the front. We don't really need them because we're still running the factory sway bar for now, but it's kind of nice to know, you know, that it does come with a nice, good sway bar disconnect from JKS. So with this kit, you have a few different options of shocks. What we did is we went with the 2.5 IFP shocks, or internal floating piston. I'm not a shock expert, but from my understanding is it kind of helps keep some of those gases and stuff out of your shock fluid. That internal floating piston will kind of help you out in the long run, especially over long bumpy trails, or if you're going over trails with speed or anything like that. It's just a little bit better shock to kind of keep that gas out of your fluids and keep these performing like they should. So that's everything that came with the kit. We also got some decals with the kit. You got a full windshield decal, which is kind of cool. A couple smaller JKS stickers. And then the instructions did come with the kit as well. So it's nice that you don't have to print these out and you don't have to, you know, go back and forth on your phone. We can take this over there with us and just make sure that we're going step by step the way that we should. Now, one other thing that we got is another taser from Z Automotive. This did not come with the kit. This is separate. So after he gets his wheels and tires on, we'll be getting this updated and getting this thrown on the Jeep to kind of correct our speedometer and then just take advantage of all the other stuff that this thing can do. If you don't know anything about the taser, then check out one of my other videos. I kind of go through the entire menu so you can kind of see all the different options and all the stuff you can do with this. So if you're interested in the taser and getting your speedometer correct after doing bigger tires, yeah, take a look at that. So one other thing that I thought was really interesting, and I did not know this, I've looked at all the stuff on this kit. I didn't know this until I actually kind of flipped through the instructions here. So this kit is set up for a factory Jeep, factory front and rear drive shaft, basically just taking it from factory and getting it lifted up. But in the instructions here from JKS, I thought it was interesting that it's saying our shocks are only for a 2-inch lift. So our shocks are actually limiting the amount of travel. And the reason they did that is because they're expecting people to have that factory front drive shaft. It actually says in here that if you had an aftermarket drive shaft, that you could go up in shock travel and go up to a 28 or 29 inch travel, which would be, you know, roughly 2.5 to 3.5 inch lift, according to their instructions. So I thought that was interesting. You know, looking back on it now, I kind of wish I would have known that before we ordered this kit, because, you know, maybe we went ahead and invested in a new front drive shaft and went ahead and got longer shocks, and then that way we could have more performance and more travel out of this kit. Now, this kit isn't his end-all be-all kit. Down the road, we're looking at doing long arms on that Jeep. So we want performance at a good price, and that's why we went with JKS. From everything I've seen, this thing will perform flawlessly, and it's a great kit for him to get started with. And then 5 years down the road or something, maybe we'll swap it out to a really fancy long arm. But in the meantime, this thing's going to perform great. With that in mind, you know, knowing that down the road we will go with an aftermarket front drive shaft, it kind of would have been nice to know this, you know, like maybe we went ahead and invested in that now and just got more travel out of this kit without wasting money on these shocks and then having to buy new shocks. So anyway, just food for thought. There's something interesting that I learned once I flipped through the instructions here. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get the Jeep pulled in, and we'll get some stock measurements, and then we'll get started. All right, so before I pull it in, I'm just gonna go ahead and take our stock measurements out here. So I'm just gonna go from the ground up through the center of the wheel to the wheel well, and we'll get some measurements in the front and the rear, and we'll see what we actually get out of this lift kit in the end. So the front is at 39 inches exactly right now. And then the rear is at 39 and 5/8, so just a little bit over 39 and a half. All right, so it's kind of interesting that we're only a little over a 1/2 inch lower in the front than the rear. However, you know, our springs are supposed to be, you know, 1.5 in the rear, 3 in the front. So we'll kind of see. I hope that we don't have that, you know, squat in the rear and the front's too high. If we do, you know, it's not the end of the world. All you got to do is come back with some coil spacers and just kind of get that back end up, you know, a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. The same thing that we did to our Wrangler. You know, right now we're just running little 3/4 inch coil spacers front and rear. Other than that, we got stock suspension because I'm saving up for a really nice long arm for our JL. So one other thing I did want to make a note of here too is that we noticed on our JL, so we have a 24, my dad has a 23. Now, just stock compared to stock, our 24 had less squat in the front than his 23. And I really think that that's because the 24s were able to have a winch from the factory. So this is just my personal opinion. I think they put a little bit either stiffer springs or taller springs in the front to accommodate for the Jeeps that were coming out of the factory with that winch. Now his is a 2024, same thing. I'm pretty sure you can get the Gladiators with a winch from the factory. So maybe they put a little bit stiffer spring on the front or a taller spring on the front, and that's why we only have that 1/2 inch of rake right now. With us swapping out coils with this new lift kit, I think we'll be fine. But yeah, there's our stock measurements. So now we're gonna get this thing pulled in and let's get started. So we got the truck pulled in. We decided we're gonna go ahead and knock out the rear first. Should be pretty easy. So we went ahead and got the vehicle jacked up, got the tires pulled off. Our jack stands are in front of our lower control arms. On the passenger side, you'll have to turn your jack sideways because of the gas tank skid plate. So what we're gonna do first is we're gonna go ahead and pull the sway bar links. We're gonna go ahead and pull off this bolt right here. What that'll do is kind of give us a little more play in our brake line. Now this is still a hard line up top here, so we don't want to go too crazy with it and bend that brake line too much or damage it. But by removing this, we'll get a little more play out of our brake line. Once we do that, we'll kind of drop down the axle as much as we can, and then we'll go ahead and remove our shocks. What we're hoping is that we don't have to loosen our control arms, or we don't have to loosen our track bar to get these coils in and out, but we'll see how much play that we have. Another thing to watch out for too, which we'll probably unhook it, but as we're coming down with the axle, we just want to watch our differential breather line there, which is just a rubber hose, and also our locker wiring. So there's a few different spots that you can disconnect those to kind of give you a little bit more play out of those lines. So this is just something to kind of watch there, and I'll let you know if we end up disconnecting anything to get more travel out of those. But first things first, we'll go ahead and get this sway bar link off, get this bracket undone, and get our shocks removed. Okay, so we've got all that done. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna basically lower down the axle as low as we can get it. I'm gonna go real slow though, and as I'm doing it, I'm gonna kind of keep an eye on all of our lines. And if I need to, then what I'm gonna do is I'll just stop there and come in and probably need to unhook our locker wiring. I'm gonna lower it down first and kind of just see what starts getting tight first. All right, so our passenger side spring came out pretty easily. Just a little bounce on the axle and it popped right out. Now on the driver's side, it's a little bit tighter, probably because that's where our track bar is connected, just a little bit less travel on the driver's side. So there's a few different things I could do from here. One thing I could do, go ahead and loosen up our track bar, try it again, should give us more travel. If that wasn't enough, I could loosen up our control arm bolts and then lower it down. And out of all of that, that will definitely give us enough travel. The other thing I could do, which is what I'm gonna do, is I've got coil spring compressors. We don't need a whole lot out of these coils just to pop them out. I'm just gonna throw a couple of coil spring compressors on there, just compress it, you know, an inch or two, and then I'll just pop it out that way. And then when we put in the new ones, I'll do the same thing. I'll just compress them a little bit, throw them into place, and then just take the compressors back off. To me, that's the way I'm gonna do it. It's whichever way you're more comfortable with. Like I said, I'm not completely compressing these coils, so I'm not too worried about the coil spring compressors, just doing it that route, because I'm just trying to get a few inches of clearance just to pop the springs in and out. So that's what we're gonna do next. I'll grab the coil spring compressors and we'll get that driver's side spring out. Okay, so this is our driver's side spring. Since our driver's side is a little bit tighter, what I wanna do is I wanna go ahead and get our driver's side spring set up, get it in, and then we'll work on the passenger side spring. That way, when we insert our new springs, this is our upper coil isolator. You can see here there's kind of a nipple on the top of it. Now there's a hole in the coil perch up at the top. So you wanna make sure that that's lined up and you slide that up in the hole, which I'll show you over there on the vehicle. So whenever we slide that up and in, since the driver's side is tighter, I want the pressure of the coil itself to hold this up into place once I get this all aligned and happy where I want it. And since the passenger side is a little bit looser, we'll do it second, and that way I can jack the axle up if I need to hold the passenger side into place. So one thing that JKS says to do, this is our factory spring, this is our new spring. You can kind of see there with the bottoms lined up, not a whole lot of difference there. I mean, that is probably only 1.5 inches. Now, a lot of things could change depending on how stiff this spring is compared to factory, you know, how much this squats compared to this. So just going off of just that height right there, not necessarily an actual kind of portrayal of how much lift you're getting. Now, one thing that JKS says to do is to remove these factory wraps off of your factory coil and transfer them over to your new coil. We'll go ahead and get these pulled off, which they're kind of hard to get off of here. They're kind of almost glued on, it feels like. Yeah, it is glued on. So, but we'll go ahead and get those off and we'll get it transferred over. Whether or not they stay, I don't know, but that's what JKS says to do, so that's what we're gonna do. Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and reinstall our spring or our coil on the driver's side. Since the driver's side's a little bit tighter, I want to do it first. Went ahead and threw our spring compressors on since that's the way we're doing it. And then we got all of our little rubber sleeves moved over. And I'm pretty sure that's what that's for, because as you can imagine, whenever your suspension compresses, these tighter coils up here, since this is a dual rate spring, will probably come into contact. What that's going to do is just going to keep kind of that chatter of those coming in contact, cut down on that. And then same on the bottom, since it's setting on a metal perch here, just kind of keeps that metal from making a whole bunch of noise. I'm pretty sure that's what those are for. Now, whenever we reinstall this, our upper coil isolator is kind of notched there at the top right here. So you want to make sure that that lines up with the end of your coil. As you can see there, we're just going to make sure that that lines up, the end of our coil with that little stopper on there. And then we're going to make sure that our little nipple on the top of this goes up into the hole up underneath on where our spring perch is. So kind of hard to get a good recording on all that. So I'm just going to go ahead and get it wrestled up in there. And then I'll kind of show you what we got afterwards. Oh, one other thing. Make sure that you clean off where your spring sits, especially if you got a lot of mud, rocks, anything like that. You don't want any of that stuff kind of caught underneath of your coil. So just make sure it's nice and clean. and then you're ready to go. Okay, so we are done on this side. Everything is in place and the way we want it. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get the coil in on the other side, and then we'll move to our bump stops and our sway bar links and all that other good stuff. But again, you just want to make sure, kind of three things. You want to make sure that the nipple is through the top on your spring isolator. You want to make sure that your coil is all the way butted up where it should be. And then obviously you just want to make sure that the bottom down here is centered. It's kind of obvious where it needs to be. So just make sure everything's nice and aligned, which we're good on this side. We're gonna go do the exact same thing on the other side, and then we'll move on to what's next. All right, so what we're gonna do next is we're gonna go ahead and set up our rear sway bar links. So as you can see here, you know, they're fully adjustable. You kind of just set them up for whatever length you need. According to our instructions here, it is 11 3/4 inches from center to center. So that's what we're gonna set them up at. We'll get both these adjusted to 11 3/4, snug down our lock nuts. I might put a little bit of Loctite right where our lock nuts tighten down to, just some blue Loctite. So we'll throw that on there, get these to length, and then we'll go throw them on the vehicle. All right, so we went ahead and put in our sway bar links. We got them set to that 11 3/4, went in through the bolt in the top. Now for this bolt down here on the bottom, it is pretty tight. I'm pretty sure that this is a larger diameter bolt than factory, which is good. That's gonna add to the strength of everything. One thing to note here on the instructions, it's kind of confusing. It says to install to the outside of the frame and the outside of the sway bar. However, the picture in the instructions has it correct, like the same way the factory one came out with this bolt coming towards us. And I just, out of curiosity, I threw it on the other way, the way the instructions read, where it says outside of the sway bar to outside of the frame. And that just puts it at too much of an angle. It kicks the bottom towards us too much. And what I mean is, like, I put this bottom bolt in this way, and that just wasn't right, even though that's what the instructions said. And like I said, the picture is showing what we have here. So just a little note there, a little bit different. So I've got these in, and what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna go ahead and torque both of them to 72 foot-pounds. Okay, so one thing I wanted to kind of make a note of here, you can slip a thin wrench behind the back of here. That's what will hold this bolt in place as you torque. So just a little note there, throw a wrench on the back side as you're torquing. Now for the top though, like I said, the instructions say to torque both these to 72 foot-pounds. As I was trying to get this to 72 foot-pounds, the crush sleeve, which is supposed to kind of stop the bolt and hold everything in place, well, the crush sleeve couldn't handle that weight. So kind of a little bit disappointed there. Who knows, you know, maybe it's just a fluke. But their instructions say 72 foot-pounds, and I only got up to like 50, and this crush sleeve started giving out on me. So I'm gonna email JKS, tell them that we had an issue with this sway bar link, get a new one, and then, yeah, so I'm just gonna keep this snug. I just snugged it up. I mean, it's still threaded through, it's still through on the backside, and it's tight. However, getting it up to that 72 foot-pounds just isn't gonna happen. Now on the other side, I kind of started going towards 72 foot-pounds. It looks like maybe that crush sleeve was gonna do the same thing. So either JKS has swapped out their crush sleeves in here, and maybe they got a bad batch, or that 72 foot-pounds that they say in their instructions is just straight up wrong. So just want to make a note of that. Just kind of be mindful whenever you're tightening these down. Just snug them up. Maybe don't do the full 72, or I don't know, just take it for what it's worth. Now you know. So while I'm working right here, I'm gonna go ahead and reattach this bracket right here for our brake lines and our ABS line. After that, then we'll move on to the shock. All right, so what we're gonna do next is go ahead and get our shocks installed. If you've got the J-spec shocks from JKS, they will actually go body down. For us, we got the Fox, so we'll go body up. The body of the shock will be towards the mounted to the frame. And then you've got this nice little kind of guard here for your shocks to keep rocks and everything from kind of pitting that shock itself. So that will go to the bottom. So we'll go ahead and just remount these using the factory hardware. And these are torqued down to 89 foot-pounds on the top and the bottom. Okay, so shocks are installed and torqued. Sway bar links installed and torqued. We got our brake lines reconnected. Coils are in, everything's lined up the way we want it. So we're basically done in the back. The last thing we got is our bump stop spacer. Pretty self-explanatory here. You got this flat surface where your bump stop already comes in contact with. We're just raising that up, what is that, about 2 inches, 2.5 inches. So it's already got holes in there, so you don't need to drill or anything like that. Just set your plate on. It comes with new hardware. So we'll drop that in there and bolt it in. And I think it says to torque it to 20 foot-pounds for these two different bolts here. So we'll go ahead and get that installed, and then we're done in the rear. We'll get the tires put on and get this thing back on the ground and get it turned around so we can start working on the front. Got the tires thrown on the back, got the truck turned around. Went ahead and jacked it up, as you can see, lifted up the front axle. If you go just to the side of the pumpkin, the housing itself, get a little 2x4 piece of wood and you put your jack right there, it'll actually lift your axle really evenly. So that's usually what I do is kind of just set my jack to the side of the housing. And then we got our jack stands under the back here underneath the frame. So truck supported and we're ready to get started on the front. First thing we're gonna do is just kind of a basic teardown, remove the shock, remove the sway bar links from both sides. And then back here, right behind your shock on the driver's side, you've got a brake line bracket. I'm gonna go ahead and remove that bolt, just so I got a little bit more play in my brake lines. So that's what we're gonna do right now. We'll kind of get all that stuff done, get the initial breakdown out of the way, and then we'll move on from there. Okay, so we went ahead and dropped our axle down and dropped our coils out. No issues there. I will say in the instructions it says to remove this bolt up here for our bracketry, but you actually get a lot more play if you disconnect this bracket that's to your lower control arm. So on this side I did both. On the other side I only did the control arm bracket to give more play in these lines here. So got plenty of play there, so we went ahead and dropped the axle down, got the coils out. So now what we're gonna do next is we're gonna move on to the geometry correction brackets. So what I did is I went ahead and removed the rear of the lower control arm, remove that bolt. On the upper, I removed the upper control arm completely. And I'm just doing this on the driver's side. Right now the passenger side is fully connected. Now in order to get all this lined back up, probably what I'm gonna have to do is remove the upper control arm from the passenger side so that I can adjust this axle a little bit. So that's what we're gonna do next is we're gonna go ahead and grab our drop bracket for the driver's side, get it installed, and then we'll start working on getting our control arms back in on the driver's side, and then we'll move over to the passenger side. All right, so with our relocation brackets, we're gonna use the factory hardware up top, and then it comes with new hardware down low. So pretty much with these, they'll slide back in and they're gonna mount exactly where your old control arms were at. So we'll just slide this in, we'll go ahead and bolt it in and torque it in, and then our new control arm mount locations are just obviously a little bit lower. Okay, so now with our drop bracket in place and our bolts in, we'll go ahead and torque the factory hardware in and get these brackets locked into place. So for the lower bolts, it's gonna be 130 foot-pounds, and then you're gonna go another 145 degrees past that. And then for the upper, you're gonna torque it to 37 foot-pounds and then go another 135 degrees after that. So we'll go ahead and get these torqued to spec, and then we'll start working on getting our control arms mounted back up. Okay, so we got our lower control arm in. Obviously nothing is tight yet. We won't do that until probably after we get everything on the ground. So the issue that we're running into is we're trying to get this bolt in here. And on these drop brackets, there's two separate holes. So the lower hole is for 4 inches plus on lifts. And then the upper hole is for where we're at, kind of around that 2 to 3 inch mark. So we'll be putting ours in the upper hole. We're not gonna drop it to the lower hole. But the axle itself needs to tilt forward. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and remove the upper control arm, just the upper control arm from the passenger side. And that should allow us to kind of move this axle where we need it to get everything lined up. So that's all we're working on right now, is just getting all these bolts in the way they need to be. I'm not gonna torque anything, just get everything hand tight for now. And then we'll move on and do the same thing on the passenger side, which should be a lot easier once we get this side kind of located where we need it. The passenger side should be a little bit smoother. So that's what we're gonna do right now. Remove the upper control arm from the passenger side to give us more flex over here, and then we'll get all of our bolts in. Now, one other thing I did wanna make a note of here, on the control arms back here at the rear, the bolt for the lower control arm is supposed to go from the outside in, and then the bolt for the upper control arm, which we don't have in yet, needs to go from the inside out. Not sure 100% why necessarily that's important, but it's stated in the instructions, so you wanna make sure you do it. All right, so we're gonna get that other side pulled, and then we'll get all this lined up and bolted up. All right, so we got everything back in place and snugged up. So here's a better look at everything. You can tell factory hardware here and here. That's our drop bracket, and then we got our new control arms located. We use the upper hole here because we don't have 4 inch or bigger lift. And then we did loosen our lower control arm bolt on the front. And we had our whole upper control arm out altogether. We did end up taking off the upper control arm on the passenger side. So that's what we had to do to get everything lined up. And then another trick that will make things a lot easier is if you throw a jack underneath your pinion, go ahead and get your lower control arm in. It shouldn't be as bad. You should be able to get that bolt in, get this located. And then for the upper, in order to move it in and out, especially back here on this bolt, you know, go ahead and throw in your front bolt, and then you're trying to get this one in and out. Just put a jack underneath your pinion, and then you can jack that up or lower it down. And what that's going to do, that'll give you all the adjustment you need. But before you do that, make sure you remove your upper control arm on the other side. So anyway, on the driver's side, we're completely done. That's what you're looking at. All this stuff, I just snugged it up just a little bit. It's definitely not torqued to spec yet. So we'll go ahead and do everything we did on this side to the other side as far as the drop bracket and the control arms. We'll get everything in and get everything kind of snugged up but not torqued down yet. And then from there, we'll actually finish installing the lift, the shocks, the sway bar links. We'll do all that, and then we'll come back and torque all this at the end. So that's what we're gonna do now. Just kind of get it all caught up on the other side, and then we'll move on to the lift. All right, so we are good to go on all of our control arms and our control arm brackets. Everything's snug, but nothing is torqued down yet on our control arms, which means that we should have tons of flex in this axle right now. So with that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and grab our coils, and we're gonna start getting them lined up. Now, as you can see, our upper coil spring perch here, it has another one of those locator nipples on the top. So kind of the same thing as the rear. You wanna make sure that that's lined up in the holes, which there's actually 2 of them. So they line up towards the back into those holes. And then on the bottom spring perch, you have a notch here, and that's where you'll want to rotate your coil around until the end of your coil is lighted up against this seat of the lower spring perch right here. So that's what we're going to do is we're going to drop the axle down. Now, with having a ton of flex in this axle because all of our control arms are loose, we have to pay really close attention to all of our wiring, our brake lines, our locker wires, all that good stuff. We want to make sure that nothing gets too tight as we're coming down with this axle because we got a lot of travel right now. So that's what we're gonna do next is go ahead and get these coil springs in on both sides. So I went ahead and before we got started with this, I went ahead and disconnected this breather line off the top of our differential because that's what was getting tight first. As far as our locker wiring, our brake lines, everything's still loose. And also one other thing is we went ahead and did the passenger side. The way the track bar comes down, it connects on the passenger side. So you actually have a little less flex there. So as we're letting out the axle, the passenger side will stop and then the driver's side will keep moving. So I wanted to go ahead and do that because I can get that coil over there kind of in place where nothing's gonna move, and I can still let out this side and it's not gonna loosen up that coil over there where it drops out and it's unaligned. So just do the passenger side first and then move to the driver's side. So that's what we've done, and now we're on the driver's side. And I'll kind of show you how we get this in because we've got a bump stop that we've got to slide in there at the same time that we're putting in the coil. And with the control arms being loose and everything, we've got plenty of room, so it shouldn't really be too hard. Also, your bump stop extension is smooth on one side and then recessed. You want that facing up. That way your bolt head is recessed. Whenever we bolt this in, it's kind of recessed down in there. So that if you do come up and hit your bump stop, you're hitting a flat surface. I don't actually think you're gonna need to. I think it's gonna sit right in where it needs to. All right, now that was pretty easy. Like I said, everything's setting in exactly where we want it. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and jack up the axle and put some weight on these springs. And whenever we come up, I just kind of want to make sure that everything's still aligned like I want it, that everything's seated on this lower spring perch. So that's what we're gonna do next. We'll come up a little bit and then I'll kind of show you how everything looks. All right, so here's kind of a better look at the lower part of your coil. You can see that's the end of our coil and it's butted up against this spring perch here, or coil isolator, whatever they call this, I forget now. But you want it all the way butted up to there. And then up at the top, you can kind of see there's a nipple there coming out and a nipple right there coming out. So we know that that is seated up and setting level on the top. And then we're just kind of looking to make sure everything is seated nice and evenly here. And then obviously make sure that nothing is caught or bound up around this this lower isolator here. So everything's great on our coils. We got everything in pretty easily. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna go ahead and bolt up these bump stops. All right, so you'll use the supplied hardware and you're gonna slide it in through the spring. I've already got this one in. And then to get your nut on the bottom, you'll have to kind of fish it up underneath. And then if you've got a good offset wrench, that's really the only way I've found to get in there to get these tight. And I think it recommends 20 foot-pounds. All right, so we did end up using red Loctite on these as well. And the great thing with these compared to other lifts is the nut that's on the bottom is a kind of a flange nut with kind of like grooves on the bottom of it. So you actually don't have to get a wrench on the bottom, which is really nice. At least for us anyway. What I've used in the past is kind of one of these offset wrenches like this and kind of fished it up in there and held it that way. But with this kit, if you just reach in there and just kind of put your finger on that nut, as you start to tighten, that nut will actually hold itself in place. So, and again, we used a little bit of red Loctite because we don't want these coming loose inside of our coil. That would make for a bad day. So we got this side snugged up. I'm gonna go do the same thing on the other side and then we'll start on the shocks. All right, so now we are ready to put our shocks in. So the one thing, so we went with the Fox IFPs. This is a very big bodied shock. So kind of what they do here are your factory ones are centered here. What they do with the Fox is they kind of offset it. So what that's gonna do is it's gonna kick it out away from the frame a little bit and give you a little more clearance. So you want this spacer to be towards the vehicle. And then same on the bottom here, you can kind of see there maybe that it's offset. You know, you can kind of see our shaft coming down there and then it's offset to the side. So what that's doing, like I said, it's just kicking this shock out away from the body and it's gonna give us more clearance. And so with the shocks, we'll be reusing the factory hardware. So I'll go ahead and get this bolt in the top and then we'll take this strap off and let it lower down to the bottom and then we'll adjust our axle to get it in. All right, so what we're looking at right now, now that we have this shock in, it's not torqued down yet, we're about to torque it down. But one thing I was just kind of looking at is brake lines and locker wiring and this vent tube line. So right now our shock is at full expansion. And so basically this is as low as this axle is gonna be able to get. And kind of what I'm looking at is just how tight is everything getting? How much room do we have to play? And with our brake line, if I were to reconnect this bracket to our lower control arm, well, our brake line gets really tight. So I think what we're gonna do is we're actually I'm gonna try to pry this open and pull this bracket off of our brake line. Everything's still secure. We don't have to worry about it getting caught on anything. But it also gives us a lot more play out of this brake line. Whereas, you know, if I was to connect there and tighten this down, that brake line gets real tight at full flex. So by doing this, it kind of saves us some time. Instead of having to buy longer brake lines, we'll actually be good to go with what we have. We'll have plenty of travel and everything, as long as I just kind of leave this bracket loose, but we don't want to just let it rattle around and make a bunch of noise. So I'll get this bracket removed off of the brake line and then we'll have plenty of travel there. All right, so for our shocks, we are good to go ahead and torque them in. The upper is gonna be 103 foot-pounds and then the lower shock bolt is gonna be 77 foot-pounds. So we're gonna go ahead and torque this in and then we'll do that on both sides, get our shocks installed, and then we'll come back and we'll go ahead and reinstall our sway bar links. All right, so the first thing we need to do before we install these is we need to get them set to length. We've already done that. So what it recommends is 9 inches from center to center. So that's what we set these up at and went ahead and tightened down our lock nut with a little bit of blue Loctite so it doesn't move around on us. So these are ready to go for the length. Now it does say once you get it on the ground, if you need to adjust it, we can adjust it. So what we're gonna do first, since this is a 2024 model, there's several different sleeves that are included. There's a thin wall sleeve that's longer. So that's what we're gonna put in through the upper part of our sway bar disconnect. And we're working on the driver's side right now. Now this step right here is gonna be the same for both sides. And what you'll do is you'll slide that in until it's flush and you want your grease zerks facing forward. So the camera is at the front of the vehicle looking back right now. So we'll slide that on there. We'll slide our polyurethane bushing on like so. And then we'll use the supplied hardware and we're gonna mount this on the outside of our sway bar on the driver's side. So we'll go ahead and do that now with the supplied hardware. Our bolt will also go towards the frame like so. And then it has a provided washer and lock nut for the back. Right now we're just gonna put everything finger tight until we get these fully installed. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing on the other side and get it caught up to where we are on this side. For the bottom, there's a longer sleeve in there and then there's a shorter sleeve. So we're gonna take the longer sleeve, again, this is on the driver's side. We're gonna take the longer sleeve and and we're going to slide it all the way in until it's flush on one side. And then now with the outer part of the sleeve that's facing towards the hub, we'll slide the other polyurethane bushing on, and then we'll use the factory hardware, and we're just going to mount it into this factory location. All right, now we'll move over to the passenger side because it's a little bit different. All right, so now on the passenger side, what we're going to do is this shorter sleeve that's in the kit, we're going to slide it in, and once we get it in, it's actually flush with the rubber, but there is a 1/4 inch spacer, and what we're going to do is we're going to slide this down in. That 1/4 inch spacer is going to go towards us to the outside of the axle. So, and then we're using the factory hardware again. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get all this slid down in there, then I'll get you a better view of it. All right, so now you can see on the outside of the axle we have that 1/4 inch sleeve, and then it's ran through using the factory hardware. So now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get everything torqued down. For the upper and lower, it's both, it's going to be 65 foot-pounds on these. All right, so what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and get ready to install our track bar. First thing you got to do is adjust it to 34 inches from center eye to center eye. That's a good starting point. Once we get it on the ground and get this thing installed, then we can kind of fine tune it from there to get our axle centered underneath the vehicle. Once we removed our factory track bar, then we'll go ahead and mount just one side, the frame side of our new track bar. We'll mount it into place. We'll get the wheels and tires on. We'll get this thing on the ground. We'll actually fire it up and move the wheel left and right to kind of move our axle around until we can get the other end of our new track bar in. So that's what we're going to do next, and everything is just using the factory hardware that's on our original track bar. All right, so there you can see our new track bar in. Just finger tight at the top right now, not too worried about that. And then down here at the bottom, not quite lining up, real close, but we'll get that bolt in once we get the Jeep on the ground. All right, so I thought I had you set up and recording that whole time, but pretty much what we did is I just had Josh get in, he moved the wheel a little bit, I was able to get the bolt in. From that point, I measured from our rear control arm bolt, lower control arm bolt, to essentially the C's on our axle. I just picked a point on the C's on our axle, and I just kind of measured that, and I wanted, you know, kind of in a crisscross pattern, and just I just pulled that bolt, unscrewed it, had him adjust the wheel, put it back in, and then just keep measuring that way. So it only took us one try. From that 34 inches that we had it adjusted to, I had to unscrew it, I think 4 rotations, and that centered our axle. So, and again, whenever we get an alignment, I'm gonna have them check all that and see if they can kind of look at all that and make sure that we're good where we need to be. But for the most part, it should be pretty well spot on. So from this point, what we have to do is we have to go ahead and torque everything. I'll go ahead, and what I'm gonna do is I'll just kind of put all the torque specs for the track bar and the upper and lower control arms. I'll just kind of put all the torque specs on the screen instead of just reading them all out to you. And that way you can pause it if you need to and take a look at them for all the different torque specs. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll kind of wrap this video up and let you know what I think about this lift, and we'll get our final measurements. All right, so that is it for this install. We are finally done. We actually did go ahead and drive it into town, got an alignment on it. So this thing is good to go now. One thing I'm kind of looking at here, and we're about to measure it and find out, but it looks like maybe the front is a little higher than the back. Not a big deal. All we got to do is get some little 3/4 inch or 1/2 inch spacers, however much we're off. We'll get those, throw them in the rear. It's not that big of a deal. If you're interested in that, you can see a video of me doing it on my JL. It's going to be the exact same process. So yeah, let me go grab the tape measure and we'll kind of check this thing out and see where we're at for our final numbers. All right, so for the front, we're setting at 42.5, which gave us what, 3.5 inches of lift, right? So right at 3.5 on the front. All right, and for the rear, we are just a hair over 41. So definitely got a little bit too much lift in the front. So what is that, about 1.5 inches, a little less than 1.5 inches higher in the front than the rear. not a big deal. Like I said, we'll just throw some 3/4 inch spacers in the rear. That'll get it leveled out, I mean, pretty close. You're not really gonna be able to notice after we do that, that the front's just a little bit lower. But that's a good thing to note here on the JKS lifts. If you've got a 24, I think because the 24s maybe just for whatever reason, however they did it, they ride higher in the front. Maybe it's for that winch. That's my idea there. But yeah, so I wish we would have got a little bit more lift out of the back, but it is what it is. Like I said, we'll do those spacers and we'll get it all lined out. All in all, I feel like this kit, I mean, it was pretty good. The instructions, they weren't great. I think the instructions could have been a little bit better. I'm a little bit disappointed about the sway bar link in the rear. JKS is kind of known for their sway bar links, especially the quick disconnects in the front. Having that, you know, clear as day in their instructions, it says torque to 72. I think I only got up to like 55 and that crush sleeve gave out on me. So they either need to update their instructions or they need to get some better sleeves inside of their rear sway bar links. So all in all though, I mean, the kit went pretty smooth. Everything lined up pretty well. I'm pretty happy with the lift itself. It rode really well. The alignment checked out. Everything was good on the alignment. All right, so again, that's the J-Kontrol kit from JKS. Pretty happy with it. I think the instructions could have been better. Kind of got a little confusing in a few spots. I probably should have just done it like I know how to do it, and then things would have went a lot smoother, but it is what it is. So anyway, that's it for this video. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Make sure you like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.